when did you really have, when did you really think like this, maybe this can be as an author, as this, like, were you going to keep writing regardless? Would it have come to an end if they were just for you and the people around you? Would you have just kept writing?
I like to think that I would have. I like to think that I would have like that. And, and I guess, at that point in time like that, I mean, the big thing for me is like an absolute disbelief that this was happening like it. And so, I mean, I don't think it really kind of, worked for me until I like walked into the bookstores and like suddenly there were these like stacks of your books. I kept thinking I'm going to wake up any minute and this just won't be real like that, but then when you walk in there and see those books stacked up there and ready to go and people lined up like that to get them signed and everything, then it becomes very, very real.
How long did it take before you thought I'm going to write a book until that happened though?
Well, that's a long story. Are you sure you're ready for that?
Let's go.
Okay. I sit down and I built the ranch myself. I did it all myself because it's out in the middle of nowhere and nobody wanted to come out there to, do construction work and so I pretty much built the whole place myself. And I got a little cabin built about 24 by 32 log and got the windows and doors and the heat in because my wife demanded heat. Women are funny that way. And so I got the heat all up and going and that's when I decided, all right, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write. I'm going to get started on this book I've always wanted to write, because I had an idea. And so I sat down and I wrote the first 2 chapters of The Cold Dish, and they were horrible. They were really, really bad. Trust me on this. I know I wrote them. They were bad. And so I thought, well, the big thing is I need to go in and find out, what the problem is like, you don't know enough about sheriffing. You need to go out and find a sheriff and talk to him and see how he does what he does. So I drove, the 20 miles into Buffalo, and I get in there. And of course, this is before 9/11. So there's no, bulletproof glass or, computer rooms or anything like this. And so I go in and there's a wooden counter and then down the hallway, there's a door propped open and the guy's got his cowboy boots up on his desk and I knock on the counter and he goes, "What?" And I said, "Hey, Sheriff, could I talk to you for a minute?" And he comes out and it's this fella, Larry Kirkpatrick, and he'd been the sheriff there in Johnson County for a quarter of a century. He had pigeon shit on his shoulders from being a statue there for so long, for God's sake.
He's a comedian, you all.
So he comes in he's talking to me and he said, "How can I help you?" And I said, I shook hands with him. I said, "My name's Craig Johnson. I got a little ranch out near Ucross and I'm writing a murder mystery about a Wyoming sheriff and I was wondering if you'd be willing to kind of help me out with this and he said, "Well, I've never done anything like that before." And I was like, "Well, I'm not looking for literary criticism here. I'm looking for how it is that a rural sheriff, would process a homicide investigation with, limited sources, limited resources, limited, staff and all this." And so, we talked for a while, and I guess at the end he said, "Well, yeah, I can at least take a look at it and see what I can come up with." And so I walked out of there and I was so sure that I'd solved my problem that I went home and added on to my house. And then I added
the books
on
are
going
to be sold
again, and then I built a shop and I built a barn and corrals and loading chutes and got the ranch all up and going. My wife had a store she wanted to open and so I went into town and tore out an old opera house and redid it for her so she could get her store all up and going. I was back at the ranch there and I was looking around for something back in the office and I yanked open the third drawer down on the right-hand side, and those 2 little lonely chapters of The Cold Dish were looking up at me, and 10 years had gone by. And I pull those 2 chapters out and I set them on the desk there and I start reading them, and they were just as bad as I remembered them being 10 years previous. And I thought, wow, your life's all in order. Now's the time when you can sit down and write this book and this is horrible what you've got started. You're going to have to go back in there and you're going to have to reintroduce yourself to this sheriff all over again because Larry was still the sheriff. And so I thought, this is going to be embarrassing. I didn't have enough nerve to do it. So I didn't. And there was one instance I think maybe a couple of weeks later, where I was in town and I was putting gas in the ranch truck. And I'm standing there at the pump island and all of a sudden this sheriff's cruiser pulls up. And Larry gets out. Now, I hadn't spoken a word to him in 10 years. I'd voted for him, but I hadn't spoken a word to him. And he gets out, starts fueling his vehicle, and he turns around and he looks at me and he pops his hat back, drops his Ray-Bans down on his nose, and he's looking at me. He's giving me this look that says, "What did I arrest you for and when was it?" And I look at him and I thought, oh boy, this is going to be even more embarrassing because it's going to be in public. So I stuck my hand out and I said, "Sheriff Kirkpatrick, you're probably not going to remember me." And he goes, "Your name is Craig Johnson. You're the one that's got the little ranch out near Ucross. And you're the one writing a murder mystery about a Wyoming sheriff." And I looked at him. This is from a 10-minute conversation from 10 years previous. I looked at him. I said, "That is absolutely amazing." And he nods his head and he goes, yeah, if you don't mind me saying so, this book is going kind of slow."
You know what they say, to be a great politician, what you have to do is you got to remember people's names.
No, doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt.
So that got you kicking.
Yeah, it really did, like that. And then that lit a fire under me, and I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm not going to die thinking, that wishing that I had done this. We've all heard the old adage of like, it's not the things that people do that they regret at the end of their life; it's the things they didn't do. Yeah,
I've been saying that around here for 2 years to people. I said, there's only two or three things in my life that I look back on. And the only things I have regret on, not the tough things, not the bad decisions you make, it's the things that I know that I wanted to do that I didn't.
Yeah.
And it was always about the perceived judgment of someone else. That's what it feels like. Because why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, to be robbed of like the opportunities in your life just because other people's opinions. Come on now.
I think maybe at 46, maybe I've learned it now.
There
maybe
you
I've
go.
won the war.
There you go.
So when was this? When that happened? When the sheriff and pumping the gas? What year?
That was and then what happened was I sat down, I wrote the rest of the cold dish in about 6 months. And then what I did was I had a couple of connections to a couple of agencies there in New York, and I called, made a few, query letters, and told them, look, I'm going to be in New York, for this week, I want to stop by and drop this manuscript off and have you guys take a look at it, see what you think about it. And, the majority of them,
the same story, right?
Never heard anything from
door closed.
Yeah.
Who are you?
Yeah.
We see these things all day long.
But then there was one that I went into and she sat down. She said she had 10 minutes for me and I said, well, that's 10 minutes more than anybody else has given me. And I sat down and I talked with her, and I discovered later she was one of the most powerful agents in New York. She was huge. She was the president of the Agents Union in New York, for goodness sake. And they said they had 10 minutes for me, and we talked through the 10 minutes. She said, tell me about your book, tell me about yourself. And I know we're going longer than 10 minutes. We're going into a half an hour or 40 minutes or something like that. And so, we finish up and I said, well, thanks so much, and I appreciate your time. And I, went downstairs where my wife, Judy, had been sitting in a coffee shop because she was so beat up from all the rejections that we'd gotten the rest of the week. She was down there and had about 5 espressos. And so, I get back down there and she's like, you were up there for a long time. Seemed like you were there for a long time. Might have gone well, right? Because you were there for a long time. And so I said, I don't know. I can't read this stuff. I don't have any idea. Maybe it worked. Maybe it didn't. I don't know. I said, well, just go home and see what happens. And we flew home, and the answering machine at the ranch there was blinking when I got home, and it was Gail Hockman of Brand Hockman Associates, and she said, don't give this to anybody else. I want it.
When did you leave that message versus when you had met her in the office?
How long was the time?
Was it a day?
Oh, yeah. It was like a day. Yeah.
Do you think she knew in that half hour she'd made up her mind?
No, because you can talk a good game, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can write it, And so I think she sat down and started reading the book and felt like, this is something different, This might just work.
Did you believe her?
Not until I saw them stacked up in the bookstores. So I kept thinking, I'm going to wake up and it's all going to be gone.